You're listening to Ageless, written and performed by author Paul Inman. Her. 5:23 a.m. Italy, 1943. 1. One of the dolly's eyes wasn't closing anymore. It hadn't worked properly since the last time it was thrown to the ground. The doll was very plain. Only a smallish dress covered the grungy body. At one time, the dress would have shown a wonderfully bright white flower, a cartoonish daisy with a silly smile across the short yellow disc florets, which was probably a big selling point for the doll. Now, however, the dress was as poorly taken care of as the doll itself. The tattered arm of this relic attached directly to the arm of the young girl who was caring for it. The girl was about 9 or so. She looked disheveled, much like her inanimate counterpart. Her gaunt features showed signs of malnutrition, or perhaps illness. She had shoulder-length, dusty, light auburn hair. At the moment, as with most moments, her hair was a bird's nest of tangles, and it looked as if it hadn't been washed in more than a week. The knotted hair flowed into her face, covering smoky, blue-green eyes. The eyes still had the innocence of youth and the curiosity of a puppy. She wore a solid teal child's hospital gown. It wasn't tied in the rear, but the girl paid no mind to this trivial fact. She was too preoccupied with covering her ears with her tiny hands. The girl lay on the floor, cradled in the fetal position, screaming to drown out the sound of the air raid sirens. Her attempts proved useless and ineffective. The sirens had blared their piercing sound now for more than a minute. All the doctor men, as she called them, had looked frightened by the sound and had begun packing several files from the many file cabinets into either garbage bins or tote bags. The young girl did not understand what was going on, and it frightened her more when the doctor men began to ignite the paperwork that was callously shoved into the garbage bins. She would have tried to keep her wits about her, but she could not understand the words the doctor men were using. Not because she wasn't intelligent. She was here because she was intelligent. The fact is, she had only spoken one language, the language of her mother and her mother's mother. The doctor men were no longer speaking that language. Now, the words they used seemed hard, dirty, and thick. The sirens continued to screech out its unwielding whine, resonating in the deepest cavities of the girl's chest, causing her discomfort that occasionally took her breath away. These times intensified in the drawing of air between the girl's shrieks. During one of these breaths, between the nasty sounds of the guttural harsh words, something drew the girl's attention. Das ist alles dabei. Nun, was ist Alessandra? Das Mädchen. Was ist mit dem Mädchen? It was her name. Even through the nasty, difficult language, with its heavy accent, she instantly recognized her own name. The doctor man had said, Alessandra. They were speaking about her, perhaps speaking about whether or not to help her calm herself as they had done in the past. The doctor man, who was being asked about the girl, looked to Alessandra, who was still in a crumpled mess on the floor. He had only 3 words in retort for his fellow doctor man. Nein, lass sie. Even through the language barrier and the ear-splitting siren, Alessandra knew what those words meant. The cold, uncaring deadness of the doctor man's eyes gave it all away. They were going to leave her here to whatever fate that came with those thunderous sirens. She closed her eyes, began to cry, and listened through the sirens as the doctor men stepped over her. She clutched the one-eyed doll between her arm and breastbone and wept. Two. Almost instantly, Alessandra felt relief that the doctor men left her behind. In the hallway, outside the door, more men began shouting at the doctor men. This was, yet again, a language that Alessandra couldn't understand. Although similar to the doctor men's language, it was different enough to tell the two languages apart from each other. Very shortly after, the shooting began. Alessandra heard no more voices from either language. She decided that if she wanted to live to see her next birthday, maybe she should find somewhere else to be. Somewhere safe. Alessandra only knew of one safe place here. This was a place that even the doctor men didn't know about. And why would they? So many different doctor men had come and gone in the years since Alessandra had come to this small set of underground laboratories. She thought that she was 5 when she came, but it was difficult to remember. I could have been 4, maybe even younger. It was so long ago. I remember they took my parents away. They told me that if I'm good, they'll come visit. I guess I haven't been a good girl. Alessandra lightly ran down the corridor between what the doctor men had called Lab A and Lab B. She knew them as the playroom and the yucky room. In the yucky room, the doctor men used a lot of needles and different masks that she hated because they scared her. Fortunately, she was going to the playroom. In this room, the doctor men gave her lots of things to touch and do whatever she liked with these toys. The doctor men didn't come into this room often, and when they did, they would wear funny suits that would cover their entire body. It always made Alessandra laugh at how silly they looked. Sometimes, the playroom would light up funny colors while she was playing, and the toys would change, as if they were put too close to a hot fire. Alessandra didn't mind too much about that. The doctor men would always replace the toys soon enough. It was in this playroom that Alessandra had discovered a loose bolt in a floor panel behind the almost life-size dollhouse. It took her a lot of effort in the beginning to work the bolt loose enough so she could move the floor panel. When she succeeded, she found she was able to move the floor panel just enough for her to slide down inside. It was a cozy little retreat. The only issue was all the wires that were also in the crawl space. Alessandra had spent enough time in this place to carefully move the wires out of the way. She mostly came here at night. Some part of her understood she was probably being watched constantly by the doctor men, but she didn't care. She needed her own place, her own space away from the needles and scary masks. It was here that she crept now, feeling more alone and afraid than she had at any time with the doctor men. It wasn't great living here, but the doctor men were nice most of the time. As she settled into the smallish, dark space, she noticed for the first time how the stress of the situation had taken its toll on her mind and body. She began to cry again, making sure she wept silently, and sleep overtook her like darkness takes the day. 9:34 a.m., Washington, D.C., 2022. 1. The tablet lay on the desk. The open file was labeled case number IT110102. It had been open for the last hour. Truth be told, he had been looking through this file for the last 35 years. It started out as an actual file that was once filed in an authentic file cabinet. Now, it was nothing more than digital disk space. There were witness reports, photos dating back more than 80 years, and several incident reports. The most recent was from about 15 years ago. He had written that one himself. This was a cold case, if there ever was one. The scanned photos, the ones before the digital camera age, were grainy, out-of-focus gems. He liked looking at those. They reminded him of his mother, God rest her soul. He had been with the agency for over 40 years. Retirement age had come and gone, but it was the case, number IT 110102, that kept him here day in and day out. He began his career when he was fresh out of high school, a cool 18 years old. His uncle had worked for the agency and talked someone into putting him into the mailroom. As a mailboy, he didn't get much in the way of action, as his uncle did, so he pursued moving out of the mailroom. It took him 5 long years to pass the battery of examinations which would give him his own desk with a nameplate like his uncle had. Today, the new kids had to have college degrees and participate in professional trainee programs just to put their lives on the line and earn a nameplate. He was staring at the back of one of those nameplates now, letting his mind wander. The front of the plate said Mark Richards in large, bold print. Mr. Richards had an assignment today, one that the younger brats might call a diplomatic assignment. That's the type of assignment he was given anymore, with his advancing age. He was to drive to the airport, pick up a package, and hand-deliver it to a scuzz. This particular scuzz had been undercover for the better part of the last 3 years. The scuzz's assignment was to smoke out a ring of weapons smugglers that were in country and doing very well at their jobs. While Richards was driving to the airport, he went over his mental checklist of the items from case IT 110102, as he had done every day. He thought about eyewitness reports of a young man and a young woman. Richards combed his memory of the past events and relived all of them. Oops, green light. Maybe I should leave the reminiscing to some other time when I'm not driving, he thought. 2. Richards had signed for the package and sped away to meet the scuzz at the drop zone. He tried to keep his mind clear and focus on the task at hand, but his total consumption with IT 110102 had, as his ex-wife would have testified, ruined his ability to fully commit to anything or anyone else. He missed the car pulled behind him a few blocks from the terminal short term. It was a nondescript vehicle, about 6 to 10 years old, maroon in color, with no distinguishing marks, not that Richards would have even noticed. The pursuer followed at a safe distance back from the company car that Richards drove. His car was an early hybrid. The agency had bought a bunch of them a few presidents back as a cost-cutting measure. Richards thought of this as a diplomatic move, a way for the president to show that he was environmentally conscious, and to sink some money into the, once again, struggling American car companies. Of course, the agency's hybrids had a few upgrades that were more than just your standard leather seats or power windows. They had bigger engines which could accelerate faster and also better steering, and turning radiuses for more accurate handling, just to name a few. Richards was getting close to the drop point. He reached up to his Bluetooth earpiece and tapped it once. There was an answer after the first ring. "Hi," Mark Richards said in a cheerful voice. "I was wondering if I could get some directions to your shop, please." "This isn't a shop, bud," the voice on the other end said. "I think you got the wrong number." "Really?" Richards asked. "This isn't Phil's greenhouse of flowers? I ported the number right from the web." "Flowers?" the voice said. "Nope. Sorry. Good luck." There was a click as the man hung up. Richards had said the code words to the letter as he always did. Basically, the conversation that had just happened was code for, "I am almost to the drop. Come alone." The man who answered the phone did. 3. The scuzz's name was Lucas, and right now, Lucas had to get to the drop point and do it alone. That was going to be tough considering he was put on watch duty at the last minute. When you had watch duty, it was your turn to make sure the storage facility full of guns and other high-dollar toys stayed safely out of the hands of people like Lucas. Luckily for Lucas, watch duty was a two-man job. "Hey, Johnny," Lucas barked. Johnny was relatively far away. "I'm gonna go grab some smokes. I'll be back ASAP." Johnny was now walking closer to Lucas. "Sounds like a shit idea to me," Johnny responded. "You know, once you're here until our time is up. The boss don't like people playing games when it comes to the goods." "Please, nobody understands this better than me. I've been doing this for years. It's like a 10-minute walk to the store and back. Cut me some slack. I haven't had a smoke in hours. I'm dying over here," Lucas said as he walked out of the little building, not waiting for a response from Johnny. 4. Richards parked across the street from a small alley on 21st and Pine. He hopped out of the vehicle and grabbed the package, which contained more bugging equipment. The bugs were for phone taps as well as room taps. It was increasingly difficult to tap phones with technology seeming to change daily. Landlines were all but extinct, and there were apps which were made just for bug sniffing, available in all of the app stores and markets. Luckily, the government had the foresight to regulate these type of apps in the mid-2010s. Room taps were more accessible, and yet more difficult, because of the amount of information that had to be processed. Computer programs singled out keywords, but ultimately a technician had to listen to large amounts of data that could range from what the targets ordered for lunch to dirty talk with the webcam ladies. As Richards looked across the street, the man that had tailed him pressed his own Bluetooth earpiece, spoke one phrase, then tapped it to hang up. "Dead or alive?" the man had asked. The voice on the other end replied, "Dead." 5. Richards hurried across the 4 lanes of traffic, narrowly missing getting smashed by a sports car and cursing the driver for being an idiot. As he stepped onto the sidewalk on the opposing side of the street from where he started, he felt a strange sensation of being watched. Richards paused and bent, pretending to retie his shoe. As he was bent down, he scanned the immediate area for anyone who looked like they were following him. This wasn't his first day on the job, but he was in La La Land for a lot of his drive. He untied and retied his shoe twice, giving himself plenty of time to look for suspicious activity from the people who were around him. He saw nothing that stuck out. He saw nothing that struck him as out of the ordinary. He thought, "I guess I'm getting spooked. It may be time to really think about retiring." But he always told himself that, sometimes more than once a day. He scooped up the package under his right arm, feeling it bump his holstered weapon under his jacket, and walked toward the small alleyway. Richards wasn't more than 10 feet into the alley when he heard a voice speak up. "Hold up right there, old man," Lucas demanded. "I was wondering if you had the time." Without hesitation, Richards replied, "Oh, I've got plenty of time." More code. Lucas and Agent Richards had never met each other, but they both knew how these things worked. Usually, the dropper was always different and the drop zone was never the same. The code words helped determine where and when the drops would happen. The last drop Lucas had was right out in the middle of everyone, on Main Street in the middle of a damned parade. That was the most nerve-wracking drop he had ever received. This one, in a hidden alley, in the scummy part of town, should be cake by comparison. Sometimes, cakes weren't very good. "Place the package on the ground right there," Lucas said, pointing to a spot a few feet to the left of where Richards was standing, "and take your plenty of time back out of my alleyway." "Oh, great, another idiot kid who thinks this is fun and games," Richards thought as he placed the box on the ground. Before he turned to leave the alley, he asked, Anything I should tell your parents? Which was more code that meant anything to report to the bosses downtown. Lucas turned his eyes down to the package which contained the bugs, thought for a second, and shook his head. This second was all the man needed to step into the alleyway, draw his gun, and fire. Six. Richards would be 59 years old this year. 59 years old, with over 40 of those years working as part of the agency. It's safe to say that his instinct is what had kept him alive all this time. Today was no different. As Lucas had looked at the package, Richards had noticed, no, felt is more accurate, that something was moving quickly and close behind him. Without thinking, Richards jumped to his right behind a small dumpster, crashing his shoulder into the plaster-covered cinder block wall. The momentum that carried Richards did a full reversal as he bounced off the wall and crashed to the ground. He drew his gun just after the first shot was fired from the assassin's gun. Richards watched as Lucas ducked violently down to the ground, virtually falling, and reached for his own weapon that was tucked into his ankle holster. He never had a chance to take aim. The assassin adjusted his aim at the man he knew as Ricky. While he did, he thought of an old incantation he had heard once about taking a life. I do not kill with my gun. He who kills with his gun has forgotten the face of his father. I kill with my heart. The assassin breathed deep and exhaled CO2 as he squeezed the trigger. The firing pin in the handheld weapon of the assassin shot forward. The point of the pin struck the primer, causing instantaneous ignition, in turn causing the cordite in the bullet casing to ignite from the heat of the primer. The pressure built up behind the projectile and forced it down the bore of the gun, erupting from the barrel in a fiery and deafening thunder of sound and light. Lucas didn't have time to draw a last breath before the bullet struck him in the chest, ripping through his heart and stopping the eternal thump in mid-pump. Richard saw these events unfold before his eyes in a fraction of a second. He watched as the assassin changed his shooting stance and fired while Lucas pulled the gun free from his ankle holster. He saw Lucas take a powerful shot to the chest, his back exploding out from the inertia of the projectile and throwing him backwards onto the ground. Mark Richards acted on instinct and began returning a wild volley of fire towards the assassin while staying covered by the small dumpster. The assassin turned and ran out of the alleyway. Richards gave chase, but knew that he was outmatched due to the obvious age difference. The assassin was most likely around Lucas's age. Richards turned and ran toward his company hybrid. This proved to be a good choice, since the assassin ran for his car that was on the alleyway side of the street. 7. Richards had his hybrid pushed to the max, weaving in and out of cars trying to keep up with the assassin's gas-eating combustion mobile. The chase had been going on for the last several minutes, moving up and down different avenues and blocks of the city. Richards had been driving these streets for what seemed like, and was damn near close to, 50 years. This gave him the advantage over the assassin who had only recently relocated. Richards' first duty when the foot chase turned into a car chase was to radio an ambulance for Lucas. He didn't think the kid would recover, but what the hell, give it a shot, right? Immediately followed by radioing the local fuzz to see if they could corner this evil and stop any collateral damage that might occur, or at least any more that might occur. The assassin drove like he was in a video game, driving on both sides of the street, causing major accidents on almost every road that the rubber of his tires touched. Also, he was up on sidewalks when he couldn't get into clear lanes, hitting pedestrians whenever possible, and it was possible a lot on the busy lunchtime sidewalks. Richards didn't know it yet, but there would be several people in critical condition and more than 100 injuries from this incident, as well as 2 fatalities. Lucas would not survive, and an old man would have a heart attack while trying to jump out of the way of the 2 runaway automobiles. At that moment, there was a hiss from the radio. A voice came crackling through. Agent Rich, is Sergeant Michaels of the... department. See if you can Hyatt Street and more. We had some barricades and order an air copy. He grabbed the receiver and shouted, filled with adrenaline, not anger. Yeah, I got it. Look for us in 2 minutes at most. He jerked the wheel to the left, leaving the forgotten receiver to bounce down in the bucket seat beside him. Richards knew if they didn't end this soon, it would only escalate. He took advantage of the crowded area they were in and began to nudge the assassin's car, driving him closer to the blockade that was set up by Michaels and his police. The two cars were still more than a few blocks away from the barricades, but if luck was on his side. Just then, the assassin yanked his car to the left down a one-way street, the wrong way, of course, and began to plow through the parked cars that lined the side of the one-way. Richards wasn't worried. He took the next road, knowing it would come out onto the same street as the assassin would come out, but quicker without cars to drive through. He used this to his advantage, by cutting off the number of streets for the assassins to choose from. Richards inherently left only a few roads that all went to the same place. That place was one step closer to the blockade. The old gas-only car had taken a beating during this chase. The one-way street was the worst, involving head-on collisions with other cars and, in effect, destroying the front of his car and some of the engine. The assassin was still trying to flee, but the car was beginning to betray him. He didn't know it, but he was getting closer to the police blockade with every turn. They were only 1 block away now, just one more correct turn, and Richards was guiding the assassin right to that turn when the gas guzzler's engine died. "Shit!" Richards bellowed as he watched the car rolling toward a curb, dying. Before the car stopped all the way, the assassin jumped out, and this became a foot chase all over again. Richards grabbed the receiver out of the bucket seat and screamed into it. "Suspect is on foot! Repeat, on foot! Hyatt Street and Juniper! I'm pursuing!" 8. He jumped out of the hybrid, pulled his gun, and began shooting as he ran after the assassin. Richards didn't shoot directly at the man running 50 yards ahead of him. He shot wide left. This caused the assassin to streak to his right down an open alleyway toward the blockade the police had set up. If they were smart, and sometimes they were, they would have left enough men to cover the blockade. That is, after all, why he had radioed his and the assassin's position to them. As the assassin came into the next street, Moore Street, he at once saw what he was getting himself into and drew his gun with a blazing speed that police had not expected and began to fire. He was very accurate, clipping an officer with his first shot and shattering a window into the face of another with his second. He jumped behind a parked car for cover and looked back in the direction of the alley, waiting for Richards to appear. Instinct had guided Richards into hanging back in the shadows of the alley, to wait for what was surely going to result in an old-fashioned standoff, or, if everyone was unlucky, a gunfight. The assassin lay with his back against the car, sweat dripping into his eyes, while he tried to steady his breathing and think of some way out of this nightmare. He had a simple job: kill the mole and fade into the crowd, show up when the heat was off and collect the other half of the payment. Now he was surrounded by cops and nothing to show for it. If his count was correct, he had 10 or 12 more shots left before he was out of ammunition, the rest of the clip. Why did I only bring 1 clip? He asked himself, annoyed. He knew why. It wouldn't take more than a bullet or 2 to finish the job. Why would he want to carry extra? Why, indeed? Richards, Michaels, and the police were in that time crunch situation still, where every second you weren't making a move, things were getting exponentially worse. Even more frustrating, Richards could somewhat see the assassin and couldn't communicate with anyone. He was in danger of getting shot by the police if he came out of the alley, guns blazing like a madman, in an attempt to get a clear shot. They were going to have to wait for Mr. "It's my job to kill people" to make the first move. It turns out they didn't have to wait more than 30 seconds. 9. Forensics later said the first bullet, the killing blow, came from Richard's gun. The autopsy showed the bullet enter at the back of the neck and exit the front, disintegrating the entire Adam's apple. That was the only bullet of his to hit the assassin, the only one fired from his gun during the standoff. The rest of the injuries suffered came from the onslaught of the policeman firing on the man. As the assassin sat with his back against the car, it occurred to him that there was not a way out of this situation. If he was taken in, he'd be killed by someone loyal that was on the inside, so he couldn't talk. He came to this decision quickly. He would kill as many as he could, and be at peace when he was taken out himself. 2 shots were fired from his gun before his spinal cord was severed, and he lost all motor functions. Due to the injury in his neck, he felt none of the other bullets that raced through his body. He fell to the ground, gasping to breathe through the hole in his neck. He was unconscious 20 seconds later, and another minute after that, he had bled out. 10. Richards was old. 59 this year, in fact. His body felt it, too. His legs were screaming with the pain of having to give chase on foot not once, but twice during this hellish diplomatic mission. He felt tired. After the last 25 to 30 minutes of non-stop adrenaline, his body had just about given up on him. He felt like he could sleep the next 3 days away. He lay down upon one of the empty ambulance stretchers and did sleep. No one bothered him. No one but the golden-haired girl in his dreams.